Welcome to the regular council meeting, Cross Lake, Minnesota, Monday, December 11th, 2017. Please rise for the pledge to the flag. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We have a busy agenda tonight, so we'll get right down to business. And as always, we have additions to our agenda, and the council has already received those. So if I could have a motion to approve the additions, followed by a second.
So moved.
Gary Hecox first.
I'll second.
Second, Dave Nevin. All those in favor of the motion on the floor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. Also, on the consent calendar, we have a long list. Some of you may have taken a look at it. All items here listed are considered to be routine by the City Council and will be acted on by one motion. There will be no separate discussion on these items unless a citizen or councilman so requests. So do I have a motion on the floor to approve the consent calendar?
So moved.
Second.
Up first, Gary Hecox second. All those in favor of the motion on the floor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Public forum. No actions will be taken on any of the issues raised. If appropriate, the issues will be placed on the agenda of a future council meeting. Speaker must state their name and address. Each speaker is given a 3-minute time limit. For the mayor's report tonight, we have the second half of the... Oh, I suppose I should let you have the public forum. Okay. And do I have to remind you to state your name and address?
Do I need to?
Yes.
Jessica Eide, 38083, County Road 66. I'm here representing the PAL Foundation, and I just wanted to present the city a check for $1,113 for park benches that have gone up around town.
Thank you.
Well, thank you.
Thank you, Jess.
Thank you so much.
My name is Dan Hegerston, 35533 Sandpoint Drive. Thank you, Mayor and members of the council, for allowing me to speak tonight. My concern is with a motion on the agenda tonight is from paragraph G, line item 1A, excuse me, regarding the Lutheran Social Services food transporter position, which will set precedent as it relates to whether or not publicly paid employees can hold a second job during normal business hours. The universal law of good government practices as applied to local, state, and federal governments is clear. It's fundamentally wrong at every level for a publicly paid employee, salaried or hourly, to accept these funds to increase his or her personal wealth by working for another entity during those set hours. To do so is highly inappropriate, unethical, and in some cases criminal. There are two issues at hand. The first issue is at hand is the residents of Cross Lake have been informed that a publicly paid employee has been receiving unauthorized funds from an outside entity to increase their personal wealth during normal business hours. Any so-called verbal authorization is questionable hearsay, and parties to it, past and present, are culpable. A mayor or city administrator does not have the authority alone to verbally break this practice of good government. I would have asked the city attorney to demonstrate in the city records of this authorization, but there was no need, as a verbal allowance was to do so was already granted. Not only was a publicly paid employee granted verbal permission by the previous administrator, but were also granted verbal permission by then mayor-elect. The second issue at hand is a motion allowing a publicly paid employee to continue to receive funds from an outside source to personally enhance wealth. First off, this motion should have been brought to the council a year ago. Not to do so puts the judgment and ethics of a publicly paid employee into question. More importantly, this motion, if passed, will be precedent, and I underscore precedent, for setting the city of Cross Lake. With the passing of such a motion, policy was set for current and future employees. I strongly encourage the mayor and members of this council to reject the motion to allow any Cross Lake paid employee to hold a second job during normal business hours. I want to personally thank the council and the mayor for allowing me to speak, and more importantly, to your dedication to serving Cross Lake and all of its residents. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any other comments under public forum?
Mayor and council. Last night I got a little surprise. We had ordered food from a restaurant in town here, and a Good Samaritan had been paying it forward in town. And he paid for my meal and several other meals for people in town here. And I just publicly want to thank that Samaritan. I don't know who it was. I guess he did it other places. I can't testify to it, but that's what I've heard. And I just want to publicly thank this person because it made me feel good. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ted. And now we will move on. Sorry, I'm missing everybody today.
Mike Reardon, Bolton and Mink. I guess I wanted to stay to the end, but I'm handing out a letter that we had submitted to the city late November. I kind of expected that would have gone through the Public Works Commission and been in front of the council. It's a letter we're expressing our interest in providing engineering services again in 2018. In simple terms, it's same term services prices as what we proposed and offered in 2017. So just so, as long as you're aware of that, and I think I'm a little confused as I look at the agenda, and down near the bottom under Public Works, there's a Public Works item in there for 2018 engineering, and then also road inventory, and there's a proposal there for that road inventory and CIP process from WSN. That is an item that we call pavement management. We were proposing in 2017-2018 to provide that to the city at no cost as part of our services. So it comes as a little bit of a surprise and some confusion to me that that's in there, and it really, I guess I'm kind of wondering the question about the role of Bolton and Mink as city engineer, what you would need from us, expect from us, how you utilize us and other engineers. And we don't, I think in our earlier conversations with you, and there's an understanding, we don't get every engineering project, and probably no engineer should, but I think it really begs a question on what is our role here in the city. And seems to me that I would like to have the opportunity just to be able to sit and discuss that with the council at some future date. Maybe that could be some special session in early January, if that would be acceptable to the council. But I'd certainly like to know where we stand with the council. So I would answer any questions you have. Otherwise, I know that there's no action on this now. Appreciate this opportunity.
Thank you. Thanks, Mike. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike.
Are there any other public comments before we move on? Okay, then, under the mayor's report, a couple months ago, the League of Minnesota sponsored a contest called If I Were a Mayor for the day, and I sent this over to the Cross Lake Community School, and we had a host of students who participated in it. As many of you remember, at our last meeting, we had 4 of those essay participants at our council meeting, and tonight we have 3. And so the first one on the agenda is Austin Ballas. And Austin, if you come up to the podium there. And Brad, if he needs help with the microphone, oh, he knows how to do it. And so, Austin, can you state your full name?
Austin Bayless,
And what grade are you in, Austin?
5th.
Fifth. And what city do you live in?
Crosby.
Crosby. Okay. Thank you. You may read your essay.
If I were mayor for a day, I would make sure there is housing that everyone can afford. I would also make sure that the city is safe by having good people keep it safe. I would upgrade the tools that the police and firemen use. I would keep the city clean. I would make play areas for any type of weather, like rainy, sunny, or snowy days. And I would make this big heart of town into a huge heart of town, and that's what I would do if I were mayor for a day. Thank you.
Thank you. And the next one is Taylor Max. And state your name
Taylor Mack,
and your grade.
6th,
Sixth. And what city do you live in?
Cross Lake.
Okay, Taylor, go ahead.
If I were mayor for a day, I would show the community that the city is a great place to work. No matter your interests, the city offers a variety of job opportunities. I would host a community job fair to share many types of city jobs. The city planners work with businesses so they can be successful. If you like to work with kids, you can tour the parks and library departments and see the fun programs they have for children. Stop by and check out the heavy equipment in public works that is used to keep the roads safe. If you want to be mayor someday, don't forget to talk to the city clerk about how elections work. Working in a city is a great way to be part of your community. Thank you.
Thank you. And just for your information, Taylor's essay was entered into the state competition, and she was an honorable mention. So. And then our last one tonight is Emma Schott. And Emma, I think you should take your cap off so we can see your beautiful face. And state your full name.
Emma Schott,
And what grade are you in, Emma?
6th,
And where do you live?
Merrifield.
Merrifield. Okay,
If
go ahead. Go ahead.
If I was a mayor for a day, I would give to the local community like some new outdoor toys for the kids to play with. Our community needs a few more activities like football, softball, and many more. I would like some new stores in the town square and a park with a playground for the kids who had all that energy from staying in school all day. So this is what I would do if I was mayor for a day. Thank you.
Thank you, Emma. And if we could call the three students back up here for just a second. And Todd, do you want to come up here? Because there's going to be a photo op with you and your students. And so here is a certificate to nominate you or stating that you are a friend of the city. And here's one for Taylor. And here's one for you, Austin. And here is the most valued prize, a gift certificate to Derek Wade. Todd Lucio, our executive director. They take a long time. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, your future leaders of our city, thank you so much. Next, under critical issues, our first one up is Cindy Mugato and Jess.
So the Chamber is planning Winterfest for February 1st through 3rd, and Jessie Eide of Moonlight Bay is the chair of the Winterfest committee, so she has a couple things to bring you up to speed.
Well, to start off, it is our 15th annual Winterfest. I think that's very important that we mention that because it has grown big in 15 years, so we're going strong. We have everything set for our Friday night big kickoff party at the community center, and then all the activities and events happen Saturday around town. As you go to all the local businesses, they either have a special or an event or an activity or something for everyone. So this year, we, as in the last 15 years, would love to trudge forward with the Soup Fest, which happens all over town. And per Minnesota state law, we will need a motion approved to host the 15th annual Soup Fest in Cross Lake on Saturday, February 3rd, 2018.
I will make that motion.
Thank you.
Okay, motion by Dave Nevin. Is there a second? Gary Heacock, second. Is there any further discussion or questions? All those in favor of the motion on the floor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried.
Thank you very much.
Thank
We'll
you.
See you all at Winterfest.
Thank you. The next one under critical issues is Corrine Hodap, who is with the Army Corps of Engineers, and I've asked Corrine to give us an update on the 2017 season. Valued partner of the City of Cross Lake.
Do you want me to make it fit?
We don't deal with this type of stuff out in the trees. Okay. Mayor, council members, thank you very much for the opportunity to come here and speak with you tonight. We're going to try to breeze through this. The Corps of Engineers is a very large organization, and it's tough to put us all in a few minutes here. But as you can see, we are right around 35,000 civilians throughout the world, actually. And we're broken up not only in the Corps of Engineers as general, but also we have our divisions, and we come down to our district, and then we come down to our southern headwaters, which is where we're located here as far as Cross Lake and Gull Lake, which is where I supervise. And so with that come all of our missions that we work on. And with, I think one that the city is familiar with that happened back in 2006 was the fact that we are funded through missions, and at that point we were still considered the navigation mission, which is what original reason that the headwaters were created, which is Winnie, Leech, Pokegama, Big Sandy, Cross Lake, and Gull Lake. So we are one unit as the headwaters of the Mississippi, and at that point we were under navigation, and what Congress did at that point was they pulled our funding, and that's when we ran into the problem, because we aren't technically navigation anymore to some degree, but as a result we didn't have funding that year. And at that point the city volunteers, everybody from what I understood, because I wasn't here at that time, stood up and helped the Corps and the Cross Lake Recreation and make it through that year until we could figure out our funding. And that led to more funding with the flood risk management, the recreation, and environmental stewardship, which are the three key missions that we have here in Cross Lake. With the issue of how we're appropriated is the fact that we are tied as 6 units. So with all the headwater sites, we are one funded line item on the President's budget. And this leads to an issue for us simply because if there's an issue at one site, we pull funding from all the other sites to help. So it's a group effort. And an example of this would be something that happened this fall at Gull Lake, where we had a sloughing of one of our embankments. And as a result, we had to do some emergency work there. And so with that, if we are not able to get a special funding out of this, it pulled all the funding out of all of our 6 sites. And as a result, our funding for this year is going to be quite a challenge. So we could be faced with limited summer staff this year, if any at all. And as you know, we are under continuing resolution funding right now, which is a big challenge for us because we basically are funded with that to get through certain areas. So right now we are funded through the December 22nd. At that point, there could be the possibility of government shutdown. Last year, in 2017, we were not fully funded until the end of June. Our fiscal year runs the 1st of October through the 30th of September. So if we don't get our full funding till the end of June, it creates quite a challenge for us to come up with how we actually make it through a year. It tends to be kind of feast and famine in our situation a lot of times. But so flood risk management is a main purpose that we are here. Without our dam, obviously, the chain of lakes would not be as they are, as we know them today. We have one main embankment that includes the dam as well as 18 perimeter dikes. This is a very active slide, but the biggest part that a lot of folks are familiar with is our summer band, right here. We have 6 inches that we operate throughout the summer, 6 inches of water that we try to stay in the middle of. And for the most part, we do pretty well at it, unless we hit heavy rains, and then suddenly we have to do a lot of gate changes, and we try to get back down to that middle of the band. So we try to sit, we're at 1229.32, which is the middle of the band, so that if we receive rainfall, we can absorb it to the top. If we get into drought conditions, we can absorb it down to the bottom, hopefully staying within that band so people on the chain have a constant level of water so they know what's out there. I don't know if you were aware, we actually were very close to drought conditions earlier this summer until we started getting rains in August. We are currently in our winter drawdown, and so if you've noticed, if you live on the chain, or if you actually watch the lake levels, we generally lower the lake a foot by the end of December. Our drawdown starts October 1st, and we go down a foot by the end of December. At that point, we reevaluate using what's called, now I'm falling apart, SWE, which is the snow water equivalent. So we start managing and looking at how much water content is in our snow. And in some years where we have a high content in that area, we do go down another half to another foot, which has happened in my time since I've been here. We've also sat basically at that foot just because the big problem is if we lower farther and we don't have the water content in our rain or in our snow, we won't be able to fill our pool come springtime. So there's a lot of monitoring and keeping track of what we're doing out there throughout the wintertime. So we don't just shut our gates and play cards in the wintertime. We're actually watching all of this. We had a very busy year this last year, and I'm sorry I don't currently have our 2017 numbers for all of our visitation. It's a challenge simply because some things are monitored in calendar year, some things are monitored in fiscal year, and visitation is one that's done in calendar year. But these are numbers from 2016, so you can get an idea of where we were at a year ago. And how we monitor these with our day use is that we have traffic counters at all of our facilities. And so we have a load factors that we estimate through surveys as far as how many people are in each vehicle that come through our site. And so basically it's estimation, but it comes down to pretty accurate. So when we start looking at how many people visit our site, it's quite a phenomenal number that come through here every year. So the day use are the folks that use our area, like our boat landings, our beaches, our playgrounds, come in and picnic, those types of things. We also have overnight visits, and that's a solid number. Those are the number of people that are staying in our campground from May 1 through the middle of October. And so we've got a lot of folks out there that enjoy our campground. What's interesting with that number is in 2008, I found the fact that we had 10,863 pads filled. This last year, we had 12,328 pads filled. So if we're looking at the numbers at the bottom of the screen here, we start seeing that we have a 57.07 occupancy rate. So out of the number of camping days that are from May 1st through the middle of October, we are filled a little over 57% of the time. And what's quite interesting with that number is that our district average is 37%. So we're not quite the most popular campground in our district, but we're only second to Gull Lake. So it's still within our section. Okay. We are not a large staff, and the government, we measure our staff by FTEs, which are full-time equivalents, and we have 4.1 full-time equivalents here at Cross Lake. So what that is we have 2 full-time staff, we have 2 seasonal staff, and 3 summer hires. So the majority of our staff is out throughout the summertime, but we only have 2 staff that are on through the wintertime. Again, these are 2016 numbers. This past season, we do dedicate campsites to our volunteers. We have, our plan is to go from 4 to 5 sites this next year. And so these are folks that stay on our facility the entire season and work every day. And what's incredible with these folks is they tend to put me to shame because I think they work more hours than I do. And they just want to contribute back and make our facility better. And we would not exist without them, or at least to the standard that we've all become accustomed to. We, a few different groups in here, is our one event we had this year, that's our second annual event, was our Wounded Warrior camping event. And one group of folks I'd really like to highlight is our fire department here in Cross Lake. They volunteered Saturday morning, and I don't know how we talked them into it, but provided a breakfast for the community. And it was a chilly, not so pleasant day in August of all months, and we still had 200 people that showed up for this event. It's a chance for folks to come out and celebrate our veterans and to have breakfast with our Wounded Warriors. Another event that we just held last weekend was the Holiday at the Dam, which is sponsored by our Light Up the Dam committee. So if you haven't seen the lights out there, take a look because they're quite phenomenal this year. But we had over 400 people visit us for 3 hours last Saturday. And I think some of it had to do a little bit with the weather, but I like to think that it had more to do with the fact that we put on a gosh darn good event. And they get to come and see Santa and ride sleigh rides through the, not sleighs because we didn't have snow, so we had wheels, wagon rides through the campground, and to make s'mores as well as holiday ornaments. So our volunteers do a lot of work for us. And one group that we like to include in those is all of our partners. And the Paul Bunyan Scenic Byway has been a partner with us since 2004. They're a cooperative association that allows us to do a lot of different types of things that we can't do with a normal group. The Wounded Warriors Guide Service, again, helped us with our Wounded Warrior event. Our Memorial Gardens with 6 different wonderful groups of folks. We did a dedication in May. WAPOA, we work with AIS, invasive species, as well as water testing. In the city, we couldn't, again, do a lot of what we do without the city's help. With Ted and his crew, as well as the fire department and the police department, with the different things that we encounter every day, whether it's vandalism and thefts that we actually had some issues with this past season. These folks helped us out, as well as with the storms that we've had. They come in and they clear at least a pathway in our roads until we can get in and take care of what we need to do to get our campers out. And also the Light Up the Dam again. That committee is just, it's been a fun group. If anybody is really interested in getting out and having a good time, it'd be the group to join. So with that, I guess thinking about 2018, it's going to be kind of I think it's going to be a reevaluate year to kind of see where we're at. We're continuing to try to improve our facilities. We are an old facility. We've been around for well over 100 years, and some of our facilities look like it too. So we're in the process of trying to rejuvenate everything and get things up to par again. And again, with all of our events and stuff, just making it an enjoyable time for our visitors. One thing I do have that I'll put up here quick is if folks want to follow where our lake levels are at, you can do that online so you know exactly where the lake is at, how many CFS we're discharging. Recreation.gov is our natural recreation reservation system. You can actually do all your reservations online, and it's actually up to date whenever you look at it, because we are 100% reservable. All of our we're same-day reservations, and so you can actually go in the morning, make a reservation for that night, and go camping by 1 o'clock that afternoon. Also, our local office, we have a general email address as well as a general phone line. If you want to call me direct, put a 0 at the end instead of the 3, so it's 5790. That dials right to my phone. With that, thank you very much for your time, and we're always open. If you want to come by for a conversation, please do, and we can answer any questions and help you out in any way that we can.
Thank you so much, Corrine. And your friend of the city's volunteer thing is right underneath there, so do you want to take that with you?
I was wondering where this happened.
Yes.
Thank you.
I gave it to them at the volunteer dinner, only I had broken it before it got there, so I had to put it in a different frame.
Just like I broke your microphone.
Okay. Thank you so much, Corrine.
Thank you.
Okay, and then the third item under critical issues is a resolution supporting the development of the National Loon Center.
Good evening.
And your name and address again.
My name is Carla White, and I'm a Cross Laker. My address is 12186 Ginseng Patch Road in Cross Lake. The resolution before you is to request your support for the concept of a National Loon Center in Cross Lake. The original idea for a Loon Center was suggested by Father Ryan to the Minnesota design team when they were here in the fall of 2016. Work is underway with the University of Minnesota Central Regional Sustainable Development Partnership to develop a marketing and feasibility study for the National Loon Center project. The target for completion of the study is June of 2018. The resolution reads as follows. City of Cross Lake, County of Crow Wing, State of Minnesota. Resolution supporting the development of the National Loon Center. Whereas the mission of the National Loon Center Freshwater Institute is to create a public state-of-the-art facility that educates and embraces the study and preservation of our state bird and the ongoing effort to conserve and preserve its natural habitat, the whitefish chain of lakes. And whereas the National Loon Center Foundation, Brainerd Lakes Area Audubon Society, the Initiative Foundation, Lakes and Rivers Alliance, Minnesota Design Team, National Joint Powers Alliance, National Park Service, and the University of Minnesota are active supporters of the National Loon Center Freshwater Institute. And whereas the National Joint Powers Alliance and the University of Minnesota are partnering to define the scope, scale, marketing, and feasibility of the National Loon Center Freshwater Institute. And whereas the state of Minnesota has a tradition of supporting national wildlife and nature centers. And whereas the community of Cross Lake recognizes the importance of fostering a sustainable economic vitality that supports growth in the areas of tourism and trade. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the City Council of the City of Cross Lake supports the continuing effort and desires to be an active participant in the conceptual development process of the National Loon Center Freshwater Institute. And we're asking that this be adopted by the Cross Lake City Council today.
And as our normal procedure, we will ask for motion on the floor, followed by a second, and then with questions or comments after that before we take a final vote. So is there a motion on the floor to support the development of the National Loon Center?
I'll make that motion.
Gary Hecox first. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
David Schrepp second. Any further discussion, comments, or questions? If not, there's a motion on the floor to approve the resolution for the National Loon Center. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Moving on down the line, under critical issues, or excuse me, we have now the city administrator's report. And Mike, I'll turn this portion over to you.
Thank you, Mayor. The first item under F1 in your packet is a note from the Northland Press letting us know that their offices will be closed from December 23rd through January 8th, and their offices will reopen on January 9th. They're also stating this is the first time in 13 years they've closed during that period. How does that impact us? They're our official newspaper, and so if we have something we need to publish, a legal notice or something in that time frame, we won't be able to do it with that paper. So that's for information on that. The next item relates to this one. It's item F1A in your packet. There's also a request from the Pine and Lakes Echo Journal to be considered as our legal newspaper. Now, this is for 2018. In talking with the city clerk, what we're recommending is if we do need to publish something during that time period, that we publish it in the Pine and Lakes Echo Journal if that need comes up. As far as deciding who you want to be your legal newspaper, you can defer that decision until the January meeting, your organizational meeting in January, okay?
Is having both of them an option? Can we have both of them?
You can have both of them as an option. One comes out on Tuesday, the other one comes out on a Thursday. So sometimes, John Colstead and I were talking about this today. Sometimes there's depending on the timing of when a request is made, there could be a few days delay in it. This would cover both of them. So, but the request right now is to be able to use the Pine and Lakes Echo Journal during that time frame if we need to.
And so we can put this on our January calendar and move at that time.
Is there any point to make a motion that we use both of them now and just be done with it, or do you want to wait?
No, other than I think it's always been the practice of doing it at the January meeting. That's my experience, but Mike, does it?
It really doesn't matter.
Okay, okay. Did you want to make?
I'll make a motion that we just use them both as our paper and be done with it.
Okay. Is there a second on that?
I'll second that.
Any further discussion or questions? All those in favor of the motion on the floor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. The second item I have on there is for council information. If everyone remembers last summer, we had a nasty windstorm that came through the city, and Public Works Director Ted Strand and I met with representatives from the Minnesota Department of Public Safety, Homeland Security and Emergency Management, because the governor declared this area eligible for state-funded disaster aid. After several meetings and looking at what we could apply for and what we were not able to apply for, they've awarded us $8,830.43 of storm damage recovery from that storm. Now, the total amount was just under $12,000, and we're only eligible for a certain percent of that, so we'll get some money back on that. If you remember earlier this year, we completed the storm disaster relief application from the previous summer, and that was the big storm. The city's share of that funding, which we got early this year, was about just under $38,000 of storm damage recovery. So that's good news. The third item I have on my report relates to the resolution the council just passed. And if you remember earlier this year, the council passed a resolution to provide funding for the research effort to determine the feasibility of the National Loon Center. And the University of Minnesota is doing the funding, or doing the study, and the request is that the National Joint Powers Alliance sign an agreement with the city to provide the city with the funds to pay for that staff person for this next semester coming up. We did this earlier, and I think that worked out well for everybody. He was actually an intern from the University of Minnesota Research Department, and they sent us a bill for $7,680, and we submitted the funding to NJPA, and then they sent us the money, and we paid the University of Minnesota to reimburse them. So what I'd like, consistent with your motion, is a council action and motion to approve that arrangement like we did earlier in the year.
I move that we approve the staffing agreement between National Joint Powers Alliance and the City of Cross Lake.
I'll second that.
Any further comments or discussions? All those in favor of the motion on the floor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
Thank you. Item 4 under my report is a memo from me dated December 11th talking about staffing recommendations and related updates. If you remember back in April, Eric Lee was promoted from police sergeant to police chief. The terms of his probationary period, as noted at that meeting, have been complete, and it was the unanimous recommendation of the Personnel Committee to remove Police Chief Eric Lee from probationary employee status. So if I could have a motion to that effect.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Okay, Brad Nelson first, Dave Schrupp second. Any further discussion or questions? All those in favor of motion on the floor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carried.
Okay, the second item is requesting to remove Police Officer Anton Marks from probation. The committee accepted Chief Lee's recommendation to remove from probationary status recently hired police officer Tony Marks and unanimously recommends to the council Officer Marks be removed from probationary status. So the motion we'd be asking you to approve would read as follows. Remove Officer Anton Marks from probationary status effective immediately, retroactive to December 1st of this year.
So moved.
Gary Hecox first. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Dave Schrupp. Any further discussion? All in favor of the motion on the floor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried.
Okay, the third staffing change relates to someone in Ted's department. We'll get to Eric in just a minute. Heavy equipment sewer operator Lee Martineau notified Public Works Director Ted Strand of his plans to retire effective December 15th, 2017. It was the unanimous recommendation of the committee to recommend to the council accept his retirement in good standing. That would be one motion, and once that's approved, I'll ask you for a motion for us to go ahead and post and publish his position to replace him.
A motion on the floor.
So moved.
Dave Schrupp first.
I'll second it.
Gary Hecox second. Any further discussion or questions? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried.
Okay, and the second part of that motion would be to go ahead and post notice to fill the open position.
Okay.
So I'll make that motion.
David Nevin first.
I'll second that.
Brad Nelson second. Any further discussion or questions? All those in favor of the motion on the floor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carried.
Chief Lee, go ahead.
I'm off probation, so I don't have to read things.
He's off probation, so now he can do this.
Do you want to do this, or do you want me to?
You go ahead.
All right. At the Personnel Committee meeting last week, or was it 2 weeks ago, whatever it was, recommended the promotion to sergeant to the Personnel Committee. For the last 6 months, I've been evaluating the officers, interviewing, sitting down, talking to them, seeing where they're going, what they're doing. We had 3 officers, all with 10 years or more, and came to the conclusion, easy conclusion, that Officer Eric Swanson should be promoted to sergeant. Eric has shown great leadership abilities. He's shown that he's wanted to learn the job. We've met, we've talked about it, what we want to do with the job, how we want to do it. And I think the two of us will be a good combination. So, with that, Personnel Committee accepted the recommendation and voted unanimously to accept Eric as a sergeant and promote him. What he would do, be on probation for 6 months. His salary would be adjusted to reflect a 6% raise over the 2018 top officer salary. And with that, I can introduce Mini-Me. He is Mini-Me. Come on up here, Eric.
Just want to thank Chief Lee and for the opportunity to be sergeant for this community. I just had my 20-year anniversary, and it couldn't be a better fit that I have the opportunity to be a sergeant and to lead the city in the direction that the chief wants us to go. He and I think a lot alike, and I think it'll be a good fit if I'm given the opportunity, and you confirm that, so I'd appreciate it.
Can I make that motion?
Yes, you
That
can.
we accept Eric Swanson as
Yes.
the new sergeant.
I'll second that.
Any further questions or discussion? All those in favor of the motion on the floor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion
I'll
carried.
clap.
Thank
There.
Thank you.
That will be effective January 1st, but to kind of push things along, got a couple chevrons for him for his collar. You know, I
Oh.
graduated to a star.
Perfect,
Now he gets 3 stripes. There you go. All right.
perfect, thank you.
Thank you.
Way to go. Thank you.
And-
Thank you.
And today, Sergeant Swanson was over at the community center talking with our senior citizens on how to watch out for fraud. So, thank you so much.
Okay, the last item on my report is a follow-up to our last month's meeting regarding my compensation adjustment. We were tied last month. Nothing has changed with that, and I'd like you to reconsider it.
So is it
I-
as stated last month?
As stated last month.
I move to approve the 6% raise for the city administrator, subject to a favorable performance review to be completed in February of 2018, as noted in the motion approved July 11th, 2017, Cross Lake City Council minutes. This raise is retroactive to July 2017.
What is the subject to part of that? Or maybe I should wait till after there's a second.
Is there a second on that motion?
I'll second that.
Any further discussion or comments?
See, what does the subject to mean on that motion?
Sure. According to the, this is what I pulled out. On motion made was, and this is July, at our July council meeting, motion made by David Nevitt and second by Gary Hecox to appoint Mike Linus as a full-time city administrator with a performance review to be completed February 2018. And so that would just be, in my opinion, a review of his goals and responsibilities, and
So the promotion or the raise or whatever we're calling it that we're trying to do today is effective today. I guess, is subject to the right terminology for that? I guess the review is a review, but do you have anything to say about that, Mike?
Well, actually, I do. There's a difference of opinion in when what it's subject to and what it isn't. As an employee of the city, we're all subject to a review in February, so that's already a requirement. The only issue here is I don't think there's any debate about the amount. It was just the timing of when the compensation would occur. It's a little unusual that you would wait that long to do something as far as the compensation goes when you've already adjusted, it looks like 3 others, effective on the date of the promotion. That's the only, and I would request that you make it effective tonight.
any further comments or discussion or questions?
So the review, that was already, you might even have me confused here now. The review was already part of the deal, but compensation was supposed to be effective.
And this didn't say anything about when compensation was going to be effective in the motion that was made in July of 2017.
But it's prorated back to
It was
Yes,
July,
his-
or
yes,
retroactive
his
to July.
pay is
10th, so-
retroactive back
But it
to
should,
July 2017, which is what my motion states.
I don't like that subject to.
Why do you wait for the compensation?
Pardon me?
Why do you wait for the compensation?
What do you mean by that question?
Well, I mean, he's been doing the job already.
But that's kind of what was agreed to. I don't know, you made the motion back in July, and that's how it was
Well,
written.
except that I don't think it should be subject to, it should just be starting tonight. I mean, you know, we should just approve it, so.
I think
we can
that's
go
what,
ahead
I
and-
think that's what the mayor said.
Yeah, I was just clarifying.
Yeah, that he'll get pay, retroactive pay till
Yep.
back to July 10th. That's what's going to happen.
Starting today or tomorrow?
If we
or-
approve it, he will. If we don't approve it, he won't get anything, so.
Right, but
You're
you're not
holding
going to
up the
wait
show.
until February to make.
No.
No.
Right,
No.
I just
right,
think
that's
the
all I was.
Yeah, we
subject-
talked about
The way
having
that
him
was-
get that
yeah.
money this year.
Right.
Yep.
And, you know, he brings up a good point
The
about
way that was,
why
when
everybody
it said
else,
subject
you know.
to the February review.
The review,
That's
is the
what- that's
review,
what was
that's going to take
confusing.
place regardless.
Right, correct.
Right, okay.
So I don't
That's all I asked.
particularly like that wording, but,
Okay, do you want to reword it?
well, I would just take the subject to out. I mean, that's all. We're just going to give him what he's got coming.
Okay, and then he will be reviewed with all the other
Yeah,
city
I
employees
mean,
in
the
February.
review takes place.
Yeah, as
Okay.
Ms. Mike mentioned, that's standard for everybody, so that kind of goes without saying.
Okay. Any other comments or questions? Do we need to redo that motion then to, or rescind
I
that
would-
motion?
You would
I
let
would
this one-
recommend that the maker and the seconder refrain that, so it's crystal clear
Yeah.
in the record, yeah.
Okay, so I will rescind the motion to read, whatever I said. Just a second, I have it here. I move to approve the 6% raise for the city administrator, as city administrator, effective
I think the consensus was just immediately is all it is.
immediately. I was thinking of the date today.
Yeah.
And would
December
be
11th.
retroactive to July 2017.
That's important as well, yes.
I will second that one. If
Okay.
it needs a new second, I don't know.
It's fine, it's a new motion.
If we rescinded, yeah. Any other questions or comments? All those in favor of the motion on the floor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carried.
Thank you. John Henke is not here tonight, so I'll start out with his staff report. And I think I'll call on others that are here if I need help talking about some of these things. But for most of them, John and I have talked in depth on them, and I'm versed on the issues. The first item on here is staff report dated December 4th, 2017, from John Henke regarding Lutheran Social Services Food Transporter Carrier position. And so what we're really looking at here is a policy decision, is how I'm looking at this, is if it is the city's policy to allow staff to leave for part of the day to do something part-time and get paid for it by a third party, you know, that's really something that should come before the council for discussion and talk about if it's your policy to do that and how you want to handle that going forward. You know, Brad, you and I talked briefly about that. Now, John's not here to talk about that, but I think there's enough facts, and I think everyone knows enough about what's occurring. And I would encourage you, when you discuss this amongst yourself, is to look at what's occurring versus who's participating in this. And I think no one in this room would argue that there's an issue with the program. We're just looking at, you know, a full-time staff person that's leaving during the day, that's being compensated by a third party during that same time frame. You just have to understand who's liable for that person during that part of the day and go on from there. So what do you folks think?
So a couple of things. It's been going on for 11 months, right?
My understanding is it started back in 2016 sometime.
And John went through the acting city, Dan Voigt, the city administrator at the time, on a verbal, is this okay? And did he say it was all right? You know, he didn't see any problem with it as long as it didn't affect his job?
I did speak to Mr. Vogt, and I asked him, and he was aware that there was something occurring. And but after talking it through with him, I don't think there was a full understanding of the complete program and how everything fit in. And so what I suggested is I said, look, this is an unusual type of arrangement. Mayor Norgaard had communicated to me during that same time frame that she was aware of this, and others were too. But I don't think that's a decision that, you know, one or two elected officials or a contract city administrator should make, because you are setting a precedence. There's a different understanding between Mr. Hankey and Mr. Vogt as to what the exact terms of that arrangement were. So this is an attempt to clarify whatever arrangement you deem that to be. You're not really approving his arrangement with the food service provider. You're approving the policy decision of a city, full-time city staff leaving their post for a part of a day to do another function and being paid for it. So you've got a number of issues to deal with, some of which were expressed earlier in the public forum, and it's really something you should discuss and either encourage or discourage, and we'll carry out whatever your direction is on that. Is that a fair statement, Brad?
No, we're here to answer questions if there is any, but I agree that we just had a back and forth on a public meeting motion. We were confused by it. So that's, verbal conversations are even harder to really understand what the deal is, and it really should go through council, not how it was done. So we just want something on the record so that staff know how to administer this.
But to me, trying to review this, it goes back a year, almost a year. And it seems to me that John went through the avenues. I think where the ball was dropped was with, actually, Patty, you weren't mayor, I don't believe, at the time. Steve Rowe was. And I think he was one of the people that was asked. And Dan.
Well,
and
I don't think
why
Mike,
it didn't go to council at that time.
Well, Mike and I aren't looking to really bless what happened. It's more from this date forward, how should we, I think that's the question in front of you today. Is that accurate?
That's correct.
Yeah, it's not the past or what happened and why. It's now that we are all understanding what's going on this instance, but it would apply to other staff and other situations possibly. What does the full council want to do about it? Not the past, more it's the future is what we're looking for direction on. This is one example, but there could be others. Back to the, we don't want to set precedent unless the council as a whole thinks we should. That's the question in front of you.
So there's really two issues here, isn't there? One of them is how do we keep the meals coming and the precedent?
No, I don't think that's the, I don't think we're trying to ask about the specifics of that program right now. We're just thinking more, I think how Mike would like to frame it, it's more generically, not a particular staff person, not a particular program, just you're now on notice that this is happening. Is this a problem in the council's eyes or not? If so, our personnel committee and city administrator and others will figure out how to handle it, but we need direction from the council.
Dave, do you have any comments?
Well, I mean, certainly there's a liability issue if he's taken off doing that in the middle of the day. I do have a little bit between a salary and an hourly employee. Is the salary, is that based on hours, and how many hours are they supposed to work? And it kind of goes down to during work, but a lot of these salaried employees work a lot. They do a lot of different things. And is that something to consider in it? And is the salary, is that based on 8 hours a day? I mean, I don't know. Or is it based on a job description that you're going to do? And in defense of John, which I'm going to go on that side for a little bit anyway, he does create a lot of programs. He actually creates a lot of work for himself running the park. I think he does a good job. But on the other hand, I don't know that we should be promoting that and extending it. So.
Well, again, and just let me remind this group that, we're not, let's not focus on who's doing this. Let's focus on what's occurring, and that's really what we're dealing with when we're talking about something like this. But to answer your question on full-time people, you find this all the time. People are either salaried or hourly, and when you staff for a position, you look at what do I need for a full-time equivalent, and by definition, a full-time equivalent is roughly 2,080 hours a year. And the expectation is that, their time for that day isn't slotted into, today you're an 8-hour employee, tomorrow you're a 10-hour, or I need to be at a council meeting tonight, and tomorrow I don't, and so it works out. No one's questioning the hours. The only thing we're trying to do is set some guidelines and some policy around this type of an arrangement.
Either Brad Person or Mike, would this topic be subject to perhaps a special council meeting, or go into a personnel meeting, or go into a closed meeting, just because of the potential length of it?
I'm not thinking.
Or are you ready to make a are you ready to make a decision
Well, I can try to
tonight?
address, so I don't think that it should not really be a closed session item, because this is more of a citywide public policy debate, not about a particular staff person. I don't believe it's not a disciplinary action from what I understand. It's more, like I said, it's the future, not the past.
Right.
There was some consensus of something in the past. I don't think we're worried about, closed sessions are for discipline. This is more a policy discussion. But if you want to go, recommend it back to personnel before you make a final decision, I also don't think it's an urgent decision to make. That'd be just fine if you'd like to have the personnel committee weigh in and come back.
Does that make sense, Mike?
That's fine.
The only urgency that there could be is, are they not coming into another agreement for the next year in January?
I don't know.
Is that part of it?
My understanding is there's a contract renewal, a personal service contract that the transporter, whoever that is, would have to sign with the program provider.
Is that due before the end of the year?
It's due right at the end of the year, yeah.
Well, that provides a timing issue.
Yeah, so I mean, we would have time for a personnel committee meeting and
I think it's
to make
very
a
hard for me to believe that it's only 45 minutes a day, because it takes more than that to drive to Pequot and back, and pick up food and do whatever.
Well, I think he goes to Pine River, but
Wherever he's going.
Probably same distance.
Yeah. You're not going to do it in 45 minutes. And are we going to allow other department heads to have jobs? And I mean, we had a speaker up here earlier who said that it's unethical.
Yep.
It shouldn't be done.
I think those are really all good questions, and that's what I'm saying. Do we move this into a personnel committee meeting where we have?
Well, the only thing with the
more time
personnel
to-
committee meeting is, that is you and Mr. Schrupp, isn't it?
It's open.
Mr. Linus. yeah.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah. So,
By ordinance, I'm the chair of the personnel committee. There's 2 council members, and then, in this case, John Henke's term runs through year end on the committee.
yeah, so I don't, is that, I don't know.
Depending on what your decision is, I should say this so it's more clear maybe, but there'll be different staff recommendations, what we're going to probably do, depending on what you vote on here. Maybe it's not tonight, maybe it's later, but I do have some advice on how to protect against liability and so on, but I don't want to, it's a policy decision, it's not a legal question. So if you decide one way, I'll have certain suggestions, and so will Mike. And same with the other. I mean, so just so you know, there's more that will flesh out, but that's after you make that policy decision.
So the Meals on Wheel program that he's doing it for is kind of a city-sponsored program, or we facilitate it? What is our involvement with the whole thing? I mean, I think we kind of put it in the paper that we've got senior Meals on Wheels or something, don't we?
Right. The city, if I may, excuse me, the city's involvement is the city provides the site location for that event to occur. We receive a nominal fee, I think it's about $300 a year, to pay for electricity and whatever. It's staffed by volunteers, and I mean, it's a good thing. I know a lot of people that use that. I think there was a letter in here from the meals. They serve noon meals for older adults at Cross Lake Community Center, and volunteers distribute Meals on Wheels in the community to homebound older adults. We serve approximately 30 to 35 meals each day. And that's some of the text from a letter from Terry Wire. Assistant Director of Lutheran Social Services Senior Nutrition Program. So nobody's arguing the benefit of the program or
Right.
whether it should be done or not. The city provides the site for that event to occur.
And apparently somehow they've got to get from there to here,
Correct.
the meals.
They used to be
However, it's
prepared
going to
locally.
happen.
Reed's did them before, didn't they?
Yeah, I
So it was
understand
close.
Reed's did it before. So the difference is.
And they don't offer, they can't bring them over here as part of the program. I mean, apparently they asked John if there's some way that they could get, I don't know how it originated.
I can't speak to that part of it. You know, and that's what we were saying earlier, you know, we didn't fully understand how the whole program had changed and worked, and again, we go back to the policy decision Brad and they spoke of.
So is one option for them to pay us, the city? I mean, they're already, somebody's paying us already to hold this,
I think it's...
cover the cost.
We're looking for direction on, now that we are fully informed of kind of what that's the arrangement, and there could be other ones that come up in the future, so that's why it's good to kind of think as broadly as we can. If this makes the council cringe, I don't know if it does, we'll react. If it doesn't, we'll work on a policy that somehow tries to address liability, for example, if he gets in a car accident on the way to Pequot or Pine River, or where it is that he goes. That's a legal question, you know, whose liability is that? Is he working for the city? Is he working for somebody else at that? You know, you could dream up scenarios where it might matter from just beyond the policy issue, just from a liability standpoint, for example.
The
So-
unique part of this particular thing to me, though, is that the city kind of, I got to believe that the public thinks that the city is kind of providing Meals on Wheels, or at least facilitating it. So it seems to me that we should make sure that that happens, whether we go pick it up or get a volunteer or have
would you-
somebody do it, or...
So are you saying that perhaps this becomes part of John's, or whoever the Public Works Director would be, part of his responsibility, and that his salary would be compensated as such? So then it becomes, as you said, people think it's part of the city that's participating in
Well,
this?
don't you think people do think it is? We have it at the community center, it's, I mean,
would that be another option? Could that, you know, that becomes part of the Public Works, Park and Rec Director, and,
Yes, I mean, I think to answer your question, if there's no compensation, I think that's what's really at the issue here. If he's doing it as part of his job duties,
right,
and maybe reimbursement of mileage, or maybe as a company car, that's not payment as a,
right.
however nominal it might be, that's where it becomes a little legally unique. I don't know what, I don't want to frame it, label it to influence, but...
Brad, you had a comment?
Yeah, the question here was that, the question here is if we wanted to set some form of a precedent, or of a policy for this particular situation, and what we're doing is we're talking about the situation at hand. Okay, so we're already off the question. This thing, I believe, is getting a little overblown here. You know, Reed's quit, they started, the meals had to get here, the opportunity arose. John came in with all good intentions, the way I understood it, and I talked to him at length on Friday, you know, just trying to help out, basically. And there was compensation using personal car, whatever. Once again, that's not what we're here to discuss, but I just want to say that I support, you know, John in what he did was with totally good intentions, and you know, the fact that this turns into a public forum, I think is sad that it wasn't handled correctly on the city's end. This is not at all John Henke's fault. Okay, just not communicated well, and he said, she said, all that stuff now is beside the point. The question is what do you want to do today? Okay, so my comment on that moving forward is you are setting a dangerous precedent. You know, once again, I want to stand behind, you know, John and his intentions of all of this. He came, he asked, he ran it up the proper flagpoles. Now we're going back to, you know, what was said back then and who was there. It certainly wasn't, you know, it wasn't this council. I mean, it didn't come to council. So with that being said, you know, from a businessman standpoint, you look at it, just remember, if it's okay for John, then it's okay for everybody else. And if you want to sit and have a conversation like this and take the time from city council for each individual, you know, would there be more? Might not be another one for 10 years. You don't know. But in that policy, you know, whatever it is and however it's worded, as Brad brought up, you just better be careful that you're not setting any type of a precedent. So I would agree with the gentleman that spoke at the lectern earlier in regards to looking at it, you know, from that standpoint, but I also, you know, just want to make it very clear that, you know, that it, you know, John, you know, we don't need to sit here and discuss what's done. We're talking about what's moving forward. Since it is a volunteer deal, I'm kind of surprised that maybe there wasn't, you know, a retiree or somebody in the community that that wanted to do that. I don't know if anybody was asked or if it was just something that needed to be done immediately and they needed somebody immediately when the change came up. I don't know if there was notice given, if it was a week, if it was 3 weeks, if it was 3 months when the change went from it being available at Reed's Market up there. That's here nor there. The question once again today is policy, and with policy comes precedent.
Is there a motion in that?
The precedent, you know, I do have some issues therefore with that.
Is there a motion in that?
It's my comment.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? It's a tough one.
I don't believe it's that tough if you stick to the, you know, forget about this particular situation. If this wasn't there, this is how you look at this. Forget about going and picking up Meals on Wheels. The question is what policy do you want to set for the city for a salaried employee to perform a service like this for hire? That's the question. So just stick to the question. Forget about Meals on Wheels. I mean, that's what the way. Am I understanding this correctly?
Yeah, I think what we're trying to pose to you, and we can't bring motions, but yeah, whether it's $2 or 10 grand, I mean, at some point the dollar figure would shock people, I think. It's not in this case, but that's kind of the point. I mean, if that seems out of line with what a salaried employee should be doing, then tell us that. If it's not, or it's case by case, or give us other direction, but that's what we're kind of looking for, is a read from the council.
Gary, do you have any comments or questions?
I think it's unethical and my question is, did social services ever post this job to somebody, or was John just there and says, well, I'll do it?
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know.
And I don't think it's right.
Dave?
You know, I hadn't thought of the precedent issue, and it bothers me a little bit. And like, John had all the good intentions in the world for what he's trying to do. And I think the reason that we're sitting here and we're all awestruck is in all my working time, I never ran into a situation like this. Thinking back, people that worked for me, did they have a job? They did have a job, I never knew about it, but they were there during the day, and it is kind of an odd thing. And then it's kind of, it's odd because it's involving the city too. It's not something that's completely separate that they're leaving for, so.
And if you allow it to go on, it's going to involve the city some way or another.
Yeah, yeah. You know, I think we got to keep the program. Yeah, I'm not answering the question with what I'm going to say, so I was off on a tangent. I'm sorry.
Well, if you did take this back to committee, you know, as brought up, I mean, if you want to do that, just so we don't sit here and talk in circles here for 20 minutes over something that we're not getting anywhere on. You know, you have to just start with the basis, you know, and I don't know the answer to this, so maybe Mike does. Is a salaried employee, is there any stipulation in there about a salaried employee having a part-time job? I mean, that up front, is there anything in the policy manual about that, number one? And then, you know, kind of just look, you know, research it from there, and once again, stick to the policy we're discussing here and not try to, you know, push it back to this particular situation. But that's what I think is what needs to be cleaned up, just so we don't end up back in this situation again.
I agree, and other for-profit and nonprofit, I've, lots of instances I've seen, but some full-time, back to your original question, I know of many positions where it's considered full-time and they can't have any part-time, even though they choose, because they need to from a budget standpoint, to work midnight to 2 in the morning. Certain employers say that's, no, you're meant to be full-time, you're devoted to me 100%. Others would say, as long as you do it off of 8 to 5 business hours or whatever the arrangement is, that's fine. I mean, others would say, that's what we're looking for.
Right.
Is,
Right.
And
Right.
if that
Stick
needs
to
to be,
the- stick to policy, yeah.
Yeah.
If I may, there is kind of a precedence, and it was me a few years ago when I was a septic inspector. Planning, and by the way, there's a helicopter landing down here due to a medical, so it'll get loud. I don't know how long ago it was. Do you remember, Ted, when I was doing septic inspections? It was early 2000s.
When I first started, so yes.
And so the city did not have a septic inspector at the time. We had people leave, people weren't certified yet. I was the only one in the city that was certified. I was a city employee and a department head. We went through an agreement, and I was still working for the city, which makes a difference here. But they paid me per septic inspection, and this was just install, so I went out to make sure that everything was set right. So I had to go off duty as a police sergeant, go out there for half hour or whatever it was, and then back on duty. And I got paid, I think it was $25 or something like that, to go out and do it just for the short time that, until we could get that gap and someone was filled in. The other thing I did is I was on the, which is still a little bit different, but when I was on the TAC team and there was a call out, there was a big discussion on who the liability fell on. Do you take a personal squad car or a personal car to the sheriff's office? Do you take the squad car to the scene? So that was all brought up, and it was decided that it was the car, the squad car. So there is precedence that has been set out there, but if, like you said, if the city contracted with Lutheran Social Services, then maybe that could work, but you still have the issue of the car. So, but there was precedent set, so I as I was sitting back there listening to you, I was listening. I figured I should bring that up.
Okay.
Thank you, thank you. Ted, did you have a comment?
I guess when does the department head go off duty? I've been here since 5 o'clock this morning. Did my day end at 5? No, I'm still here. But did I take a break in the middle or go do something for myself? I think that employees should have that right, as long as it doesn't conflict with your job. Now, if you're going to get into this, one thing I just came to my mind, what about our volunteer fire department? They're paid volunteer fire department. And I have an employee on my staff that's a fireman, and if it's a fire call and it's an emergency life or death situation, he leaves and goes to that call. So where does it end? I'm just bringing it up.
Yeah, well, that's a good point.
Good point.
Good point, good
Yep.
point.
And that's the point about this program, is it is kind of a city-sponsored program, so.
Mike, I'm going to go back to my original question. Are we better off to put this into a personnel committee meeting or a special council meeting where we can really talk about putting together a policy that would make sense for the city instead of sitting here for the next 15 to 20 minutes? What do you think?
I think you can direct us to come up with a policy and come back with something.
Okay.
If my question, or my answer to that question would be, we framed it at the very beginning, and this is bigger than his
thing.
contract that might come due here. I don't know the facts on that, but it's a bigger question than that, which would tell me we should take whatever time you need and do whatever policy you want to have done.
I
It's
think
not
so.
about him, it's a citywide policy.
Yep. So let's table this and move it to a personnel committee meeting, of which the council can be there, however,
Can't say anything.
they can't say.
How can I be at a meeting and not say anything?
Okay, so you can write your notes and pass them out, I guess, huh? Or, Micah, I'm kind of asking for some direction, or put this into a special council meeting, and that's the thing on the...
We'll go back to the committee first, and then if we need a special
Okay,
council meeting, we can do
perfect.
that.
Sounds great, sounds great. Yes,
What do
Dave?
we do for the program in the meantime?
You don't do much during the day, do you? Do you have any
I'm not
available
talking about
time?
my program.
I
mean, we've got a program we got to
Just
keep
let it go.
rolling.
This is getting...
That's-
this is
We
getting-
acknowledge that it's
So-
moving.
Let the man keep picking up Meals for Wheels and then just...
So through the end of December, we're going to leave it as is for right now. Okay?
Yep.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I just think we do need to think about it.
I do too. I do too.
But I love the fireman analogy.
Yeah, great,
They're leaving to go fight a fire and you're paying them. I love that one.
great comments. Thank
You
you.
need to think about that too while you're at your personnel committee meeting.
And those are already identified in the policy. There are policies around emergency response personnel.
Okay, thank you. Continue, Mike.
Please.
Okay,
Continue.
the rest of this shouldn't take
So
that
then, I
long.
understand that the Personnel Committee is going to come back with a recommendation to the council?
Correct.
Okay.
Mike, may I interject on B?
Sure.
Maybe you already know this, but the applicant called me last minute and asked for it to be tabled.
Okay, that
So
makes that one
It'll be
easy.
really short then, if that's what the council so wishes, but I would recommend that we table that.
I'd recommend that the council follows Brad's recommendation.
So moved.
Okay, the next item, we'll move to item C on there, and this is John's normal report minus the pickleball update. So, a while ago, John and I were talking about his budget and his computers, and I said, John, what are you using for your computers? I haven't seen any purchases come through. I know your software is old. What are you doing for backups? Something like that. He needs to replace basically his system. Most of his system, dates back 10 years or more. And so what we're trying to do, I set him up with the consultant the city uses for the city's computer system along with the police system. And so they met with CTC IT is the company that we have a contract with. And so what John is looking at is he's replacing two desktops and a laptop with current software. And along with that, we're looking at replacing the firewall. And what the firewall is, it's the security layer between your computer network and the internet and third-party intrusions to your data, along with the related network switches. So what we would do for John's system down there at the community center, since he's not linked into us up here, he has things like membership records, waivers, a lot of personal data that needs to stay private. Right now, as I understand it, it's on a desktop. Somebody can walk in there and walk away with it. Or if it crashes, what do we do for a backup? Kind of a similar thing that we fixed in here. And so what we do is we would set his system up similar to how City Hall is set up. He'd have a backup server. You have a server-based system with a backup server, and every night it would update his data to the cloud, and then there'd be a local copy. And it's just a more secure, up-to-date system that he can use to manage the...
Would that GIS system that we were just talking about, that the engineers were going to come back with a program for?
No, this is not a GIS system. A GIS system would relate to planning and zoning. This would relate to membership records and the daily administration of the
But because he
Park Center.
manages the right-of-ways and all that stuff, I mean, should that be part of that? I don't
No,
know.
they're separate. No.
Okay.
They're not hooked into planning and zoning in any way, shape, or form. This is strictly for the operations of the community center and the library, for basically the membership system and the things that work with that. So what John's requesting, what this would cost for a laptop, 2 computers, a server, a backup server, and a maintenance contract to make sure it works and it continues to work, would be a little over $11,000. He has current budget money and computer money for 2017 to take care of that. The only problem is they probably wouldn't get it done this year, so we'd be looking at carrying over some of that into next year. So the request is, council action motion for the 2017 budget included $2563 for the purchase of computers. The remaining balance would come from the unused park funds in the 2017 park budget, meaning the capital part. So the total cost of that would be about $11,600.
And already is in the budget, as you just stated. We just need to carry it over.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
We'd like to authorize them, I'd like you to authorize them to go ahead and get going on this.
I'll make that motion.
Okay, great.
I'll second it.
Okay, first Dave Nevins, second Brad Nelson. All those in favor of the motion on the floor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried.
Okay, the second motion he's asking for is he would like to adjust the compensation that he pays to Donna Kiefer through the Silver Sneakers program. Donna's been in the community center aerobics and silver sneaker instructor for nearly 20 years, and it's one of his revenue makers and vital programs at the community center. And I asked John, I said, well, when was the last time you talked to Donna about is she happy with what she's being paid, and if you want to adjust it, now would be the time to make that recommendation, because we're going through the budget and so forth. And he's recommending that he adjusts her from $24 to $26 per class. As far as what she does for that class, I don't know if that's too little or if it's reasonable, but I don't have an issue with what he's asking for. You can go more if you'd like.
Would there be anything to look at, anybody who comes in and does a class like that at the community center, give them half of the revenue they make?
One of the problems we have with that, and there's a program that we do that, it's the Zuba class, there's a certain amount that goes to the instructor. In this instance, this is tied in with their insurance policy and their program for the Silver Sneakers program for seniors.
I don't know, I mean, it'd just give them incentive to get more people in, they'd make more money, promote the class.
I don't know what she has for attendance at that. But again, I don't have an issue with his request. Actually, I would have.
I'll make a motion to accept that increase.
First, Brad Nelson, is there a second?
I'll second it.
Second, Dave Schrupp. All those in favor of the motion on the floor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carried.
Okay, and the last item, I think, on his report, we already addressed during our budget. When I opened up our budget meeting at 6 tonight, I talked about one of the changes that was made to the budget, and this was the change. If you remember back 2013, about when I started, I'd asked John, I said, what's your capital plan? How are you going to replace this equipment? And you've got treadmills and elliptical machines and the fitness equipment that you're charging fees for. Why don't I see any requests in here to replace this stuff? Because you're telling me it's old and you got to fix it. So what we did at that time is we set aside, it was roughly about $13,000 per year through the normal budgeting process to take a slice of money each year and put it aside in a reserve so that when it comes time to replace that equipment, there'd be money available to do that. So what John is asking for is what we've already done. We've put that in the budget for next year, and so now he can get together with his group and figure out what they need to replace in 2018. So he'll come back with a proposal on that. So you really don't need a motion on this because you handled it in the budget already.
Okay.
Okay?
Okay, great.
Mike, would you inquire sometime with John, what fees are brought in through that weight room? That would be interesting. Be nice to know that our fees should be set so they're at least offsetting. You know? I mean, if the weight room, that's kind of a spiff to the community center. So just to make sure the fees are in line with what is charged commercially. So if Cross Lake Fitness down here charges, I don't even know, $45 a month, I pay that annual. But I think it's important that those fees stay in line with commercial fees and that there's no, deal at the city's weight room compared to what you would pay out in the real world. I mean, there's no reason that
They should be
if you're buying $33,000 worth of new equipment, I realize it's in the budget, but then that weight room should be, pretty much paying for itself. So maybe that needs to go up $5 or $10.
Yeah,
I mean, just maybe it doesn't. Maybe it's bringing in, and that's what what we hope is that we've got it set so that what they're paying, at that, what they're paying there is the same as what you would pay at any other, and that it's not cheaper to go to the community center, weight room than it is, fitness room than it is to go to a commercial. Just to make sure that we are not in any way challenging or competing with, with the commercial enterprise. That's been
Yeah.
brought up before,
Yep, in the,
and I think it only makes sense.
in respect of challenging them, saying we're offering the same service for a cut rate price.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so, just if I could point out the council too, every month, you're provided a report in here, and I think John has already exceeded his budget for the weight room fees. They're not jumping out at me at the moment, but I know they're in that 30,000 plus range every year.
Awesome. You answered my question. Thank
So,
you.
And in the consent agenda, he did review all of his fees, and so we already approved the recommended adjustment. So, as a credit to John, he really looks at that stuff. And
Yep.
and I'm always
I've never heard
challenging to
that,
say, are
that
you charging
particular one
enough?
broken out.
Yeah,
So a department that pays for itself, that's awesome.
that's good.
Good question, thank you.
Okay, I've said enough, so I'm done.
Okay.
And
Thanks, Mike.
we can go to the next item, and that'd be Ted.
Public Works.
Somehow I think I'm going to help you, right, Ted?
What's that?
Go ahead, you go ahead.
I'm about half asleep, so I apologize. I lost my place now.
You're on item G2A.
Yeah, I might have left it back there. There it is. This memo is from me. With the busy 2018 season with the wastewater plant, as well as Manhattan Point, the road improvements we have, is my desire to utilize Bolton and Mink for the wastewater system and to utilize WSN for the wastewater, for the road system. I don't need to have engineers and getting confused on which way, who's going where and when. I'd like to keep it straightforward. With that, I would like the council to make that motion to use WSN for the everyday stuff and Bolton and Mink for the wastewater. And this is coming from me. This is, I've talked to the commission before. I had a consensus about it, but I never have taken it as a motion.
Is there a motion on the
What was the
floor?
last motion we made when we changed them?
You were utilizing Bolton and Mink for the day-to-day, or the engineering for, and
For the city engineer,
city engineer.
and now you're changing that.
I want to go back to the way it was.
Can we get our motion on the floor with a second, and then we can go into discussion? Or do you want, it sounds like you want to discuss first.
Can I ask Mike
Yep,
his
absolutely.
thoughts?
Sure.
I mean, because we don't work with them that much.
I've
at
worked
all.
with both WSN and over the last year, Bolton and Mink. And, I really have to rely on, Ted's working with these guys day to day. All I really see are the bills that come through and information requests and follow up on things like that. So I have to rely on Ted to say, Ted, I need a recommendation that we can bring to the council so they can make an informed decision. I think you've got a good relationship with both of them. Some will say, well, I like this engineer because of X, or I don't like this one because of Y. In the end, it doesn't matter. You've had, on the sewer plant, you're seeing, some successful needed changes in the plant that Bolton and Mink is implementing, and that's a good thing. And you're also seeing the road projects we did last year that, aside from weather, really went off without a hitch. As far as the road project goes, and you saw a bridge built within about 30 days, so I really have to rely on Ted's judgment to do what works best for him and what he feels about it.
I guess what I'll say is we've been operating this way for all of this year, and I know there's been some discussions in the past about there's no reason why if we get a special job we can't give it to whoever we want. And I'm not the guy that's got to work with them, so I think I'm going to go along with Ted's recommendation and make a motion that we agree with what he wants.
Is there a second to that motion? I'll second it just to get the discussion going. Okay, questions, comments?
From my branch, though, in the last year, since we've changed the engineers, I don't feel like Bolton and Mink has really had a chance to go out and really show what they have, because WSN has been carrying over the last years and seems to be plugged into it.
We already have WSN under contract for another year with Manhattan.
So I guess, I mean, I've just, for the whole last year, I've been confused that we haven't really done what I thought we were going to try to do.
It's been a very busy year.
I thought that last year when we named Bolton Mink, WSN, they were going to finish up the road projects that they had, and then it was going to switch over. That's
what I thought too, but it just seems to kind
that
of
was the
keep
drift
rolling.
I got, because
The conversation was that we weren't going to switch horses in the middle of the stream, that they had already started the engineering and et cetera on these existing projects, so that we were going to let them finish them. Therefore, moving forward, we did choose to decide to try a different engineering firm, which we have not done yet, other than Mike sits at the table here. You know, the pavement management plan, he's been waiting for information for months to implement that, getting it in an Excel format, which seems to not have come across the table. I think we need to revisit this engineering conversation if somebody's not happy with the way it's going, and have a conversation about where we are going, because we're just confusing ourselves here. You know, we made, you know, and then there was the excuse that, well, they have the history, and once again, I'm not picking on WSN here. Well, if we continue with WSN, we can go another 5 or 10 years, and guess what happens? They have the history. You know,
right.
Who's going to get, you know, you know, I mean, that comment doesn't have any footing whatsoever under it, because, okay, they've been doing it for 16 or 18 years, they have the history. Well, yeah, duh. They've been doing it for 16 or 18 years. Well, guess what happens if they do it another 3 years, 5 years, 10 years? Hey, they still have the history, don't they? The idea is that we made a change for a reason. If this is being questioned, then let's have a meeting.
And what was that reason? Just to remind me again, why are we changing? What is the purpose of the change?
Well, we brought in a different city engineer for the general idea, it was voted on at the time, to mix up this engineering, okay? With the idea we have an engineer, let them do our research, and then when it comes to bidding projects and that type of thing, we could, you know, you don't have to give them all the jobs, but, you know, I'm just saying, if we went down that road and then we're not utilizing them. So I think if you want to do this, just my comment, then you know, maybe have another meeting and discuss engineering. We're already contracted, as Ted said, for next year's road project, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And we've got a comprehensive study coming out, right, a comp plan. I don't like that word plan, because it never seems to actually be that. It's a comprehensive study, okay? And that has got, obviously, it better have, for what we paid. I mean, it has all the, you know, many different roads, so they've obviously looked into this with somebody. Has WSN sat in on those meetings and supplied that, or is Bolton and Mink? Who's been working with the comp plan so far?
I don't know.
I
have never been invited to a comp plan meeting.
Okay. I mean, that's another thing. I mean, whoever's been working, I mean, obviously, they've had to have been involved with the development of this comp plan, so whether, I don't know, was it WSN or was it Bolton and Mink? So they would probably, you know, that's another thing we need to, you know, answer that question, and, you know, which direction have we been going with a lot of these things? Seems a little confusing.
Well, one of the things is, about the only thing that I can remember out of Public Works was your salt storage building as another project.
We looked at it with Bolton and Mink. They gave us their report, and then we brought it back to you, and we went with WSN. I guess Bolton and Mink at that time was tear it down, start over. That's what it came out of from them. And today the building's still standing, and it probably will stand for years and years. It's going to need some repair at some time, but it's still standing.
But I guess in addition to that, I don't think that we've issued or had any other engineering projects other than what we're working on right now. We've got roads and the
Road,
sewer
bridge, and the
plant.
wastewater plant,
And
so
the
what we've
bridge,
been
and
working
those
on.
are all in the past, you know, they've all been,
We've had other little
So-
things that they've commented on as far as some right-of-way issues and working with Xcel Energy on something, and like I said, my brain's foggy right now. Yeah, there's some other things that they've worked with us on. They're still up in the air. We haven't resolved them.
so it's, you know, it's not like we've been shooting over their bow all the time. There just hasn't been any other work.
And can I make a comment? The road inventory, we're looking for a different system. The system that they have offered us, and Mike and I sat through in the interviews and heard them say these things. It's a proprietary system. We don't own it. It's their system. We want a system that we can use with John and myself, and John that's what his job is GIS. But we want a system that the tool that we can use, and every day we can use, and we're not going to somebody else for data. We want to be able to put data in ourselves and enter it ourselves.
But isn't that coming back to you? Both of them, aren't they both coming back with what they can offer?
Well, one's telling us it's for free. The other one's telling us it's almost $15,000 to do it.
Right. But
When you get something free, you get what you're paying for.
Well, but I thought you extended that over and had them come back at the next meeting with,
I did.
What do you have?
I did that, and Mike wanted me to bring this forward to you tonight.
Okay. Well, that's an interesting piece of information. So who can speak to the two systems?
Well, that's what, at the Public Works last month, I went to it. That's what they were going
And so
on.
right now, we have a motion on the floor to appoint Bolton and Menk to continue as your sewer management engineer, and WSN as your city engineer / road management engineering. That's what's on, just to clarify, that's what's on the floor right now.
And Dave made the motion and you second, is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
I mean,
again,
ultimately, it's your decision. You guys, I'm just giving you my recommendation would be, we've looked at both of their products as far as the road inventory and the capital. I have a different opinion. I think you get what you pay for.
I'm going to go back to one of the comments that I made, early on, and that was that when we get a recommendation, in this case from Public Works, I'm assuming that they have a history or a longevity of many more years. Some of them have actually been working in other cities in the same area as you are, and that we have a staff that is sometimes minimal, and that we have to be conscious of the time and the additional work that we put on them. But most importantly, for me, it's as a city, we must remain fair and unbiased, and, make sure that we are not potentially getting into any areas of conflict of interest. And that's just a general statement. My first one really stands, is that if this is a recommendation by Public Works and Ted and his staff, and he works closely with Mike Linus, that
Well, and
my motion would
both of these
stand.
motions are from me. So it stops with me.
Yep, absolutely.
If you don't want to go with my motions and you want to stay with the way you are, I'm fine with it. I'll work with whoever.
So are you ready to vote
I'll
on?
follow up your comments there, Patty, with just a quick one, and I don't feel that Bolton and Mink has had an opportunity to show us what they can do in the
Okay.
last year, so
Okay.
that's all I
But
want to say.
Can I make a comment that we haven't had any projects for them to do other than the sewer plant? There just
Exactly.
hasn't been anything, so nothing's changing, and Ted runs the department. Ted knows what he has seen. I've been to meetings, and his employees are providing feedback, and you're probably getting this recommendation from them. And that's why I asked Mike, because we don't work with them, you do. So that's why I'm supporting you, Ted.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions before we move on the motion? All those in favor of the motion on the floor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Nay.
Nay.
2 ayes, 3 noes. Is that what I heard? Okay.
Yep.
Well, with that, then it's no use bringing the next item forward, because we'll wait and bring it to you another time, because it's WSN again, and you were going to vote it down, so.
Well, I just don't understand where the transition is and where the opportunity is here, and I haven't seen it in the last year. So I'd like to see something there that feels like there's an opportunity, and I haven't seen it.
We just haven't had the opportunity to do that, but we will work towards that.
Yeah, okay.
The last one is, John Grutman is here, the design engineer for the wastewater plant, and he's got an update on the sewer plant along with a little change order. With that, I'm going to ask John to come forward and explain it. Have Shar in your thoughts and prayers, gentlemen and ladies. She's at the hospital with her son right now, so.
Oh, Shar is? I was wondering where she was.
Oh, we knew that she had to leave quick. Try.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor and Council. Quick update on the wastewater plant, and I don't know if in your packet we did have a memo that we updated today, and if Shar has some, if she had to leave, that maybe did not get copied in time, so I apologize. Yep.
Got her in there.
It looks like Mike has it, so it is in there. I guess long and short, the contractor, did begin work. Dewatering took a little bit longer than they anticipated, so they really were able to fully engage and begin construction around the middle of October. Since then, things have progressed fairly rapidly. There's 2 major concrete structures. One is the well water tank, which is for the fire department use and also for backwater use. That is nearly complete, just a top slab remaining on that. The EQ tank, which is the most critical tank in the process, we'll have the walls poured on Thursday, and all remaining on that for concrete at that point will also be the top slab. And they're proceeding immediately to do the top slab in the EQ tank, which should be poured, I'm guessing, probably the first week of January, unless they have enough staff available to pour between Christmas and New Year's. They're going to run a little bit of partial staff that week, so anticipate that tank should be complete within the next, within the next month. Which that's the tank that's critical also for handling high flows, particularly with the St. Patrick's Day celebration that comes up in the city in March. So contractors work to get that one done and move that as a priority up. So everything's looking good in that end. So most of the deep work is complete. I see where most of the risk in the project is, and much of the piping. They ran into a couple hiccups with piping. One, they found some construction debris, and they were grumbling about that. They've not requested any extra time or money for that, other than it did cause them a little hassle as they dug through that. Secondly, we did run into one conflict on piping. There's one pipe invert that was unknown, and the pipe that we're installing, of course, runs right smack dab into that. So we're looking at is trying to just temporarily reroute the existing 6-inch pipe so we can lay the 12-inch pipe at the grade we're looking at. The 6-inch is one that's Ted's had some concerns about coming into the project. They did try to televise it, and there was some solids buildup in that, and they couldn't get the camera through. A little bit of a sag in that. So the plan would be just to temporary reroute on that to keep that alive for the next few months until the new EQ tank goes online and the new 12-inch pipe goes online. In order to be able to take that off long-term, we have a minor piping revision to what we call the RES piping, and that would be $11,923 change the contractor has. Then the second half of this is also good news, is on some tank drains on the oxidation ditch. As the existing pipe was found, it runs right underneath the building footings. It was built around that. Contractor was looking at a way to avoid trying to shore the building and take the cladding off that. I did find a resolution to go in on the far end of the tank, and that contractor actually offered a deduct to be allowed to do that, $4,000, $221. So we recommend, obviously, that we do look at that. The net change, as we're speaking right now today, is $7,701 for those 2 changes. And at this point, looking ahead, where are we sitting at? Most of the digging is complete, which is where most of the risk in the job is. The second part of the job that might have some changes, we've just kind of run into that, is in the basement. The RES pumps were changed with the flood damage from last Memorial Day. The inlet valves in that and the base elbows were found to be very corroded and not operable, so we're looking at getting pricing to replace 3 inlet valves in those pumps also. That's a condition that was found when we were replacing, or Ted had the pumps replaced that were damaged with the Memorial Day flood. That piping, the price we don't know on that yet, but that's really what we're seeing for areas there. Otherwise, the project is progressing very well. And a little update, I guess, also for council on, on this change. We did in the project have built in a $70,000 construction allowance for changes. So my recommendation would be, to prove this to be charged against the construction allowance. Purpose of that is just to handle when we run into conditions identical to this, where we have unknowns, where we run into a conflict, where we run into a valve that doesn't work, pipe fittings that are in poor condition, to handle some of those items. It's not to cover the contractor if they're struggling with underbidding something, or it's not to add, gold plate the project at the end, but to handle those type of things. And there's would always, be a summary of the items that were charged to that. Questions for council or comments, Ted?
We've been working very closely with them and the staff and myself and brainstorming, looking at any potential things that are coming as we get farther into the project. And so far, we haven't identified anything that we can visually see. There's always that hidden piece of pipe that might be underground that we might have a piece of damage on or whatever, but right now I don't foresee any other really changes to this project other than this little one.
Thank you. Any questions for John?
Keep the credits coming.
I don't have a question, but I do have one comment. One of the questions I always get from certain council members, I'm not going to pick on Dave at all, but Schrupp that is, where are we at with the budget on that? Typically when you have a project like this, we know we have a budget. I came from a world where every project, we did a lot of research and development projects, and every project you did, you put a number on it, and you knew at any point in time where you're at. To date, if anyone's interested, we've spent about $665,000 through today on this project. Now that includes the completed payment requests that we've received from Eagle Contracting, Engineering, and then if you remember over the last couple of years, we've been doing some of the things as we could, like adding the building. We replaced some fencing. We did new gates, radio control system, and a bunch of other things that we would have to do that we knew we had to do. We didn't put them in the contract. So aside from the change orders and the pumps and the elbows we talked about earlier, we're at about $2 million to go on it, to complete it. We're at about $2.7 million for a total project cost. So we're watching that every time we get a bill. Or I get a phone call from Ted that says, guess what we found today? So we'll keep you posted on that.
Thank you, Mike. Okay, thank you, John.
Thank you.
Our last public forum, no action will be taken on any of the issues raised. If appropriate, the issues will be placed on the agenda of a future council meeting. Speaker must state their name and address. Each speaker is given a 3-minute time limit. Nobody wants to come up right now, huh? Okay, moving on. Is there any old business? Is there any new business? If not, this meeting will adjourn into a closed session. Thank you. Meeting adjourned.